Good evening. Hope all of you are doing well. A good moed. We are ready to get started. Gitten moed. Tonight we're learning Maseches Shekalim Daf Ches, and we're starting on the bottom of Zayin and Beis at the new parak, the parak of the Shlosha Prakim. We will just do one blot tonight. I'm still trying to chip away. We'll get there. We'll finish Shekalim on the same day, on the appropriate day. But this whole Passover thing is beautiful. The Mishnah here opens Halacha Aleph Masnisim B'Shlosha Prakim B'Shana Tormenas Alishka. We previously learned in this Masechta, right at the beginning of the Masechta, that from Aleph Adar, people were already starting to collect money for the Mishkan for the sake of paying for the korbanos of the tzibur. So there were 3 times a year that they would cash out. They'd reach into that account. There were 3 times that they'd reach in to take the chatzi shekel, the Maseches shekel that we would all have given in, and it would be b'prosa Pesach. Literally, it means with halfway before Pesach. We don't yet know what that means. It will mean 15 days, but we'll see shortly in the Gemara what that means. B'prosa Pesach, b'prosa Atzeres, b'prosa Chag. These were the 3 times when they would cash out. They would take out the chatzi shekels and go buy animals. And then the rest of our Mishnah, and frankly, the rest of this halacha, all the way, the whole first Amud almost, speaks about the following, which is, are these times at which we make withdrawals from the lishka for the sake of buying korbanos, is it the same as the times where we recommend that people do meiser behemos? Says the Gemara, behem, these dates of 15 days before the Shalosh Regalim, behem granos shel meiser behema divrei Rabbi Akiva, those are the same times when we recommend that people do meiser behema. And Ben Azai argues, Ben Azai says no, the times are not the same. Ben Azai omer be'esrim v'tisha be'adar, no. One of the times when we do Meiser Behema is on the 29th of Adar. Ube'echad b'Sivan. One is on the 1st of Sivan. Ube'esrim v'tisha b'av, and v'tisha b'av. And one is on the 29th of the month of Av. So we're going to get into all of this a little bit later, but basically that's already 2 shitas. One shita is that Meiser Behema was done at the same time as the Tormenes Alishka, when they would make withdrawals for the sake of buying korbanos. They'd also recommend to Klal Yisrael to do Meiser Behema. The second is a set of 3 dates by Ben Azai. And Reb Lezer and Reb Shimon Omrin, Be'echad b'Nisan, Be'echad b'Sivan, U'chav Tesbel, 3 dates as well. And we're going to get into all of why these dates all make sense, why these different mahalchim are mistaber. If you look at the very last shita, the shita of Reb Elazar and Reb Shimon, it says Echad Nisan, Echad Sivan, and Chav Tes Elul. So it asks the Mishnah, why did you say, just follow your pattern, right? So it's like when you take the IQ test, like you're supposed to find a pattern. So this says the first of this month, the first of that month, and then the end of the previous month, of the final month. So Mibnei, says the Gemara, because that day is taken, the Mishnah, Mibnei Shu Yom Tov, that day is Rosh Hashanah, L'chol HaDeos, no matter where you live, no matter who you are, everyone is keeping Rosh Hashanah and Aleph Tishrei. And you're not allowed to do Meiser on Yom Tov. So we just pushed it, we brought it back one day to Chav Tes El because you weren't allowed to do the Meiser. Why were you not allowed to do the Meiser? What, you can't count? No, the reason why is because the way that we did Meiser was when we let them out of the pen, you'd count out the first 9, and on the 10th one, you'd paint it red. And that's Stoveya on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do that. And certainly on Rosh Hashanah, we would have the same limitation on Yontif. This is not one of the Meleches Ochel Nefesh that would be allowed, and therefore, the Shita of Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar, who said that Meiser Behema should be done on Aleph of Nisan and Aleph of, let me just get it right, Aleph Nisan and Aleph Sivan and Chav Tes Elul. The reason we didn't do it the other way on Aleph of the following month, not Chav Tes Elul, but Aleph Tishrei, was because it was Yantiv. Fine. So L'fichach Chechtimud b'Chav Tes Elul. Says the Gemara as it opens up on the bottom of Zayin Amud Beis, 5 lines from the bottom of the page, 6 lines from the bottom of the page. Amar Rabbi Abo. Rabbi Abo, who at the end of the daf today we'll see a tremendous story about him. He's going to be the capstone for the evening. Says the Gemara, Kol hein de taninan pras palga. Whenever we see the word pras, it means palga, but you have to know half of what? Half of a month, half of a year. What are we talking about? Half of the time between one chag and the next. So says the Gemara, palga de lamed yom kodem lamoid shedorshin behilchosav. Because as we know, there are 30 days that we're supposed to dedicate prior to a chag in order to learn about that chag, and that's why each of these chagim have that 30-day extension, or I should say precursor, that time that's before, and we take half of that time, 15 days, in order to set aside in order to make sure that we're giving for the Beis HaMikdash, to make sure that we have enough animals for the Beis HaMikdash. This is, of course, going back on the Reisha of the Mishnah, which spoke about Tormin Belishka, making sure that we have enough enough animals for the Beis Hamikdash. The Hein Geranos, 5 lines from the bottom. This was the sheet of Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva said that the dates that we recommend for Klal Yisrael to do Meiser Behema are the same as the dates of Termin Belishka when we do a withdrawal to buy animals. Says the Gemara, Hein Geranos v'chul Amar Rav Yochanan Mibnei Shein Pirkei Leda. This is the time when animals are most likely to give birth. The animals are most likely would give birth in the spring and in the summer and in the early fall, but not so much in the winter. It's just their mating seasons were such that it was around Nisan. We'll see later today in detail that that's the case. And that's approach number 1, the Shita of Rav Yochanan, that this is the time that the animals were born. Rav Achav, Rav Tanchum, Bar Chia, B'Shem Rav Yoshev ben Levi, Kadesh Yeteh Behema Mitzuya Le'olei Regalim. No, that's not why. The reason why we do the Meiser Behema now is so that there's a lot of animals that have already been Me'usar, so that people could sell them and that people could be able to enable others to buy them and therefore have animals for the Shalosh Regalim. Amar Rav Yudan Shelo Yavo Lidei Bal Ta'achar, to make sure that one doesn't violate. The reason why we do this at this time of year is to make sure that when there's an influx in the market of animals, that no one should violate Bal Ta'achar, the delaying of the process of removing the tevel status from an animal, and thereby violating potentially an answer. And Amar Rav Yusa Kol Hamasha Tivlo Over Bal Ta'achar, anyone who keeps his tevel for too long, he keeps his animals as tevel for too long, he could technically violate the Isra of Bal Ta'achar. This brings us to the top of Daf Ches Amud Aleph. Taman Tanina. We know in our shul we have to determine what's fiscal year. When does it start? July 1 all the way to June, whatever. January. You follow the January schedule. You follow the membership cycle that shuls have, which is pre-August, whatever the case may be. What was the fiscal year? What is the relevance of the fiscal year? We didn't discuss this in the Mishnah. In the Mishnah, we only discussed when we do what we do. But we didn't discuss which animals are part of the Meiser process. In order to determine which animals are the 10% of what. So if I have to give taxes on money that I make, it's from January to the end of December. So I have my fiscal year. If I make an extra $1,000 on January 1st of 2022, it doesn't apply to this year. That's in next year's taxes. So the same would be true. What's the Meiser? How do we look at the fiscal year of Meiser Behema? So this is a 3-way machlokes in the Tanoim on the top of Ches Amud Aleph, Taman Taninan. We learned over there, namely, we learned in a Mishnah also, Rameir Omer, Be'echad Be'elu. He says that it all follows Be'echad Be'elu, Rosh Hashanah L'Meiser Behema. That is considered the Rosh Hashanah of Meiser Behema. Rosh Hashanah L'Meiser Behema is the same thing as saying the beginning and end of the fiscal year. So any animal that's born from Echad Be'elu until the end of the next month of Av, the upcoming month of Av, all of that is fiscal year for Meiser Behema. And if whatever, that would be the breaking point. Fine. So then the Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, Omer Be'echad B'Tishrei disagree. They just follow the regular rules of Rosh Hashanah. They follow the Meiser Behema rules. The fiscal year is based on Rosh Hashanah. And Benazai Omrim Eluliyim, the months of Elul. I can't decide between the two of these shitas. Rav Meir on the top line said that Elul is part of the next fiscal year. You go up to Echad Be'elul. So, and the second shita of Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon, they said it's Echad B'Tishrei. And Benazai wanted to kind of be safe. So he said the Eluls get measured on their own. So any animals born between the beginning of Elul and the end of Elul was measured separately. We'll get into detail a little bit more. So Benazai Omer, he says the Ha'eluliyim, the months of Elul are always misasrim b'fnei atzman, are always, their mitzvah is always separated within whatever animals were born that month. Amar Rav Chune, some say Amar Rav Huna, either way. Taima de Rav Meir. Why is it that Rav Meir says that it's Echad Be'elul? What kind of Rosh Hashanah is that? We know in Maseches Rosh Hashanah that there are Rosh Hashanah, but what is the Echad Be'elul? It's a very strange time. So says the Gemara, we need to peel back the curtain here because it doesn't mean what it seems it means. So Rav Chuna says the time of the Rav Meir ad kan have a mismatzos leiled min hayashanos mikan ve'elach ein maschilos leiled min achadashos. Really, the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Behema, the fiscal year begins by Nisan. And the question is, when did the animals conceive? We make the backwards math of if the animal was born before Echad Be'elul, they must have conceived before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. If the animal was born after Aleph Elul, which was because these small chayas had a 5-month gestation period, so from Nisan to Elul was the time that they would carry their babies. So if the animals were born before Aleph of Elul, that indicated that the animals conceived before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So that's really the line of demarcation was the fiscal year was Aleph Nisan, but not from birth, but from conception. How do we learn conception? There's no pregnancy tests. So then what did they do? They just looked backwards from the time that the baby delivered and did a perfect subtraction of 5 months of the gestation period. And that's how it all worked out, according to Reb Meir. That's why he says Echad Be'elul. Echad Be'elul is really code word for really the fiscal years from when the animal got pregnant 5 months ago, approximately, either before Rosh Chodesh Nisan or after Rosh Chodesh Nisan. But the Rosh Chodesh, the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Behema is really Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rav Yusa bar Rabun b'shem Rav Chuna. Time of Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Shimon, they hold Tishrei. They hold that it's Aleph Tishrei, Rosh Hashanah. Why? Because it's based on a pasuk, Lav Tukarim Atzon, Elu HaBechiros. The pasuk says that when the animals were wearing clothes, what does that mean? That's a sign that they got pregnant, a reference to those that got pregnant earlier in the process of the animals that got pregnant. The pasuk is V'amke Yatfu Bar Elu HaAfelos. There were other animals that got pregnant after Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And what does the continuation of the pasuk say? Yisro'o, they were re'im, they were friends. Namely, the animals that conceived before Nisan and Adar, and the animals that were conceived after Adar, after Rosh Chodesh Adar, all of those animals which were then born either in Elul or up to before Elul or up to Elul, including the month of Elul, they were all together. They were all reim af yashiru. They were very happy. Elu ve'elu nichnasin l'dir lehis asher. So the Gemara says we have a pasuk that indicates, not like Reb Meir. Reb Meir wanted to say that the Rosh Hashanah for Meiser Behema was whether the animal was conceived before or after Rosh Chodesh Nisan. And Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon say absolutely not. The pasuk doesn't indicate that way. The pasuk indicates that the animals that were born before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, that were conceived before Rosh Chodesh Nisan or after Rosh Chodesh Nisan, they were always nichnasin l'dir lihis aser at the same time. So therefore we see that the month of Elul is included in a fiscal year, and therefore what's after Elul? Tishrei. So that's what their machlokes is predicated upon. Amar ben Azai hol ve'elu omrim kach, because Rav Meir says on the one hand that Elul is excluded from the fiscal year. It's the beginning of the new year, and because Rav Shimon and Rav Elazar hold a different shita, he says I'm not willing to paskin against either of them. Yehu ha'eluliyim, that the months of Elul, anywhere that they're found in the calendar on any fiscal year, mis asrim bifnei atzman. Okay, how do we then understand this kind of pshara, this compromised approach of Ben Azai? How does it work out? Okay, so says the Gemara as follows: Nolad lo behei be'av vehei be'elul vehei be'tishrei. Let's say that there was an animal, there were 5 animals born in Tishrei, 5 animals born in Av. Sorry, skipped a line. 5 animals born in Av, 5 born in Elul, 5 in Tishrei. The halacha is ein mitzdarfin. All of them are measured as separate meiser. One is from definite fiscal year current. One is from Elul, which we're not sure about, so we do all the Elul ones on their own. And one is from Tishrei, which is the next fiscal year. Everyone agrees. However, if an animal was born on the 5 animals were born in this month of Tishrei, and then 9-10 months later in that same year, that same fiscal year, 5 animals were born, Pashat Harei L'Mitzdarfin, they're all in the same fiscal year. So this approach of Ben Azai creates for a bifurcated year in the following way: everything from Tishrei up until the end of the month of Av is one pool. Everything in the month of Elul is viewed on its own for Meiser. And then we reach the new fiscal year. Basically, there's a suffix about Elul, so Ben Azai treats it kind of loosely. So asks the Gemara against Ben Azai, about 12-15 lines down, almost a quarter of the way down on Chesed Aleph. Says the Gemara, Uben Azai machri al divrei talmidav. I don't understand. Why isn't Ben Azai making a decision here? These were his talmidim. What are you trying to make everybody happy for? You took out the Elul not to go against Reb Meir. What's the problem? Well, I don't understand. Just pick one. These are your talmidim. Aser of Yirmiyah of Maisha b'shem Reb Shmuel bar Rabbi Yitzchak shekenechliku aleha avos olam. No, yeah, it's true that they're talking about it now, but this machlokes about the fiscal year line of Meiser Behema is an old machlokes. Who did the machlokes actually stem from? Uman ninu avos olam. Who were these greats from the previous generation? It was potentially his Rebbe, Tana Rav Yonah, Kumi Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rav Yonah taught in front of Rabbi Yirmiyah. Who were they? Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Akiva. They're the ones who were arguing, really, in the previous generation. They're the ones who were arguing about when the fiscal year of Meiser Behema begins. Does it begin on Aleph Elul, like Rav Meir said, or does it begin on Aleph Tishrei, like we saw that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shimon said at the top of the page? So it says the Gemara, Zosa Meres, we can see from the language that Ben Azai used, that it must be that Ben Azai chaver vit Talmud Hayadir of Meir. Now, we may have heard the phrase of a Talmud chaver sometimes when a congregant is particularly close to the Shul Rav. The Rav may refer to that person as a Talmud chaver, which is a beautiful terminology, that there's We're both friends, and I'm still the rabbi of the shul, but we're close. We're very close to one another. So there's a machlokas rishonim how we understand what a Talmud Chaver is. According to a more lenient understanding, a Talmud Chaver is someone who you've learned any one thing from, which is everyone. That's everyone. You've learned something from someone. Every Rav should learn something from every Balabas, and every Balabas should learn something from all their friends. Everyone's Talmud Chaver. But there is a more strict line, which is that you have to mamish be a Talmud and then grow to be like your Rebbe, which is much more challenging, hopefully. Hopefully the Rabbeim are on such a high level. So that the Gemara is going to make a diuk here that says it must be that Ben Azai was not only a chaver, but he was also a Talmud. Why? Because if what Ben Azai was saying when he said, well, I don't really want to pick like you, I don't want to really pick like you, he was really not talking about the people in front of him of Rav Meir on the one side and Reb Shimon and Reb Elazar on the other. He was really talking about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Shmuel. And what did he say? Says the Gemara, in Tema Rabbe, if you want to say 1/3 of the way down Chesed Aleph, if you want to say that Rabbi Akiva was a Rebbe to Ben Azai, then Isbar Nash, is there a person that would say, Omar LeRabbe, Hol ve'elu amru kach ve'elu amru kach? That was the language he used above. You would never use that language, but since he said that way, no, you would use a term of respect and reverence. You wouldn't say elu and elu. It's not a nice way to talk. Therefore, we assume that he must be a Talmud Chaver, that Ben Azai was a Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Avun b'shum Rabbi Shmuel bar Rav Yitzchak shama lemin hada. He learned it from another location. Elsewhere in Shas, elsewhere in Shas is a reference to a machlokas in Baba Basra. We'll get there in years from now. I don't really know when. It's a long time away. So what happened over there? There was a machlokas. Amarle ben Azai ala chalukin anu mitzdaer. And every time Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue, we're mitzdaer. And then at one point, Rabbi Akiva had said, I think they're arguing even in somewhere else. So then Ben Azai said, Ela shabasa machlok aleinu es hashavin. Even the ones that we think between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel aren't a machlokas. You, Rabbi Akiva, you're basa, you're coming along and you're saying that it's a machlokas. Give it a break. Not everything can be a machlokas between them. So from that language, what do we see? It's also meres. Ben Azai, it must be that Ben Azai was chaver v'talmud haba Rabbi Akiva. It must be a Talmud chaver. Why? In Tema Rabbe, if you're going to tell me that Rabbi Akiva was really the Rebbe of Ben Azai, then how in the world could Ben Azai say what he said? Isbar Nash. Is there a person on the planet that would be Omar LeRabbe who would say in this language, Ela shevasa lachlok aleinu es hashavin? No way that Ben Azai would talk to his Rebbe that way. Not possible. And therefore, the Gemara concludes that Ben Azai must have been a Talmud Chaver of Rabbi Akiva. Again, we have to kind of hold a memory of some of these types of things to know the flow of our history. How did our Masorah travel? Was Ben Azai a pure Talmud of Rabbi Akiva? Now he's Talmud Chaver. It's a little bit different. And we still need the Machloket Rishonim. Is a Talmud Chaver anyone who you've learned something from? That should be everybody. Or no, is it that higher level, a higher standard where you have I remember when I was a Rebbe in Hillel Torah, I taught kids that I could see the second they opened the Gemara, their basic skills were significantly better than mine. And I was the teacher and they caught me multiple times in error. And they were in 7th and 8th grade, just sharp minds. They were totally, the only difference was that I knew more data than they did, but their skills were way better. So that's Talmud Chaver. Like he's gonna blow everybody out of the water in just a matter of time. So that we have to figure out what that machlokes is and how we define a Talmud Chaver, because it has implications halacha l'maisa about the levels of respect we need to have. Can we be so blunt with the Rav of our shul for a Talmud Chaver? Okay, almost halfway down. Taman at the 2 dots. Taman Tanin, and we learned in another Mishnah, we also learned earlier today that we said Kol Hanolden me'echad b'Tishrei ad Kaf Tes be'Elul, that if it were to be fiscal year of the actual calendar year from Tishrei to Elul, Harei Mitzdarf, and of course everything in that year would combine. Obviously not according to Ben Azai, because Ben Azai says that the Eluliyim were always on their own. Chamisha lifnei Rosh Hashanah, if there were five of them born the day before Rosh Hashanah, v'chamisha lachar Rosh Hashanah, pashut ein mitzdarf in the fiscal year. Don't give me bills from 2019 when I'm filing the taxes for 2020. I don't want to hear about your Meiser Behema from the previous year. Fiscal year is Aleph Tishrei. It ends Chav Tetz Elul, and everything else is ein mitzdarfin. Hey, lifnei hagoren v'hei la'achar hagoren. Remember where we started today? We started in our Mishnah that there were certain days where Chazal said you should do Meiser Behema on that day. Don't get confused, says the Gemara. Those days were not defining in regards to fiscal year status. No, those were just days on the calendar that you should do Meiser Behema. But says the Gemara, hey, Lifnei HaGoren, V'hei La'achar HaGoren, Harei Elu Mitzdarfin. Just don't get confused. There's it's almost like paying taxes quarterly. The fact that you pay taxes quarterly, it doesn't mean that which is before the payment and after the payment are different fiscal years. No, they're not. You're just splitting up your year to be even. The Goren, the days where the Mishnah implies or indicates that one should give out the Meiser Behema, those days are not valuable in regards to determining what the fiscal year is. The fiscal year is more global. It's 354 days, whatever the Jewish calendar is. And then Amar Rabbi Yitzchak Hada Omeres, this teaches us the following. Just as a little background, the Gemara now is going to see, is there an equation between Meiser Behema, the development of animals in conception and in birth, to the way we view fruits and their Meiser, because fruits also have to have a fiscal year. What's their fiscal year? Tu B'Shvat. That's the Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat higia chag ha'ilanos. What is the value of Tu B'Shvat? It's not just to have the fruits and not only to appreciate them. It was also the fiscal year start for fruits. So would we make a comparison between, let's say, the conception of an animal and the beginning of the growth of a fruit on a tree? And then going back to Behema, would we say that the birth of an animal is similar to when a fruit is technically edible, which is a shlish? That's what the Gemara is going to consider right now. Halfway down, Ches Amud Aleph. Amar Rabbi Yusa, Hada Omeres, it implies from here that Meiser Behema lo asu osa lo kechenet velo keshlish. It implies that the stages of Meiser Behema, of conception and of birth, are not similar to the stages of ripening, of creating a fruit, of chenet and shlish. Chenet is when the fruit begins its small growth on a tree, and shlish is when a fruit grows to the point that it's conceptually edible. Says the Gemara, it can't be that the comparison was made, because in Tamar Kechenet, if it were to be that our Mishnah would have compared the conception of an animal to Chenet, to the beginning development of a fruit on a tree, Lisni kol ha-me'ubarin me'echa b'tishrei ad esrei b'tisha be'elul, then our Mishnah, this Mishnah that we just learned, right at the 2 dots, a few lines ago, should have had the language of me'ubarin, those who are pregnant, conception. But that's not what it says. It says noladim. And in Tamar Kishlish, if you want to say that really it's like when the ripening of the fruit, the shlish, when it's edible, is similar to when the animal is born, the immediate day that the animal is born, well, there's a side halacha not mentioned in the Gemara, but critical to understanding the Gemara, which is that an animal that's just born and not 8 days old has no shaychus to Meiser yet. It's not old enough. It has to first be 8 days old. So therefore, this animal is really a nothing. And therefore, says the Gemara, in Tamar Kishlish, if you are going to make a comparison, where an animal which is born, a nolad, is compared to the development of a fruit where it's a shlish, and you want to say those are the same. Well, they can't be. Listen, what you should have said is kol hanoladin, all the animals that were born, ad esrim vishnayim be'elul. It should have only said up to the 22nd of Elul, because any animal born on the 23rd, 24th, 25th, they won't be 8 days by the time the end of the fiscal year starts. They're not shayach to Meiser. So the Mishnah can't be making the comparison between the world of Meiser Behema and the world of Meiser Peros. Rav Shammai, b'shem Rabbi Bibi, for Reb Chia, he says that's not true. Kishlish also saki Reb Shimon. There is a way to make a comparison between Meiser Behema and the fruits. How so? To Amar Reb Shimon, mechusar zman nichnas ladir lehis aser. Reb Shimon was of the opinion that an animal, even though it wasn't yet 8 days old, was able to be put into the deer, was able to be put into the pen as part of the Meiser. So come Rabbi Mana im Rabbi Shammai. Rav Mana got up to have a conversation with Rav Shammai, and he says, Amar lei, at amres hada milsa. It's not chada, it should be hada. At amres hada milsa. Did you actually say this thing, that everything is like Reb Shimon? How can that be? Taman tanin. And we learn. Benazai omer ha'iluli imis asrin la'atzman lo afilu nolad ad esrim v'tisha be'elul. He didn't say anything about 22. He said that even in the month of Elul, it's all 29 days. So islach lemeimar benazai ki Reb Shimon v'lo ki Rabbana. You're getting all creative with this day 22 thing, Reb Shimon, that they're nichnas ladir, that even if they're less than 8 days old. Ben Azai doesn't say that, so you can't force these words onto Ben Azai. V'lo ki Rabbana. He's not going to say like the regular shita, where we don't assume that a child, that an animal that's less than 8 days old is part of the deer, part of the Meiser. Says the Gemara, no, we can get out of this as well. Maybe the comparison does exist between Meiser Behema and Peros. What did we say about the rabbis? You're right. We don't do the Meiser on these animals, which are only 6 days old, until the next fiscal year. But the animals, it's a rebate, but the animals count for the previous year. We do this all the time in our taxes. You spend money in a particular year, but it really was for the previous calendar year. All the time. This is Meiser B'chol Yom. So same exact thing here. So the Rabban are going to say it's a technical issue. Yeah, you can't give Meiser when an animal's 6 days old. So if the animal is born on the 24th of Elul, you're right, the fiscal year will end before the Meiser kicks in for this animal. So what? Do the Meiser on Gimel Tishrei, but that's still going to be factored in from the previous fiscal year. That's what we did by the Rabbanan, so we should do the same thing as well. So I'll read this again. Kema de'at, or 5-6 lines before the end of the halacha. Kema de'at Amar al Rabbanan manichol l'shana haba ve'mis asrin b'nei shana. Just like the Rabbanan would say, the Rabbanan don't think that an animal that's less than 8 days old can have meiser on it. So what they'll say is do the meiser at the beginning of the next fiscal year, just register the details back in the previous year, no problem at all. Kach at Amar al de Ben Azai. When Ben Azai doesn't say the 22nd of the month should be the cap, he says that the cap is 29th. It could be the same exact thing, and really we do compare it to Shlish. Says the Gemara, Manichin legoren haba ve'mis asrin b'nei elulim. So that's what the Gemara says, that we could actually make a comparison between our world of Meiser Behema and the world of Meiser Peiros. Amar Reb Chia, Zosameretz Yamim Shehabechor Mechutzar Zman Bohen Olin Lo L'Toch Shnaso. That it seems to be that in regards to a Bechor who's Mechutzar Zman, namely that he was born after Kaf Beis of the month of Elul, he won't hit day 8 prior to the end of the fiscal year, prior to the change of the year. So Bahen Olin Lo L'Toch Shnaso, we still register that animal as a Bechor to the previous year. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Mana, Amar Rav Yona, Abba Shama Limin Hada. My father taught me this, the same exact idea, that this animal that's Mechusar Zman, and it won't become 8 days old until after the year changes past Rosh Hashanah. We don't care. We still look at it at the previous year. Based on what? It's based on a pasuk, Kol Bechor Asher Yulad Begomer, Hazachar Taktish. Says Gemara, Haketzad, how do we know that he's going to become in that year? It's Mishat Ledaso Atmone Loshana. We always register its year of birth from the day it was born. Afal Pi, that it's Mechusar Zman. Even though the animal is not yet eligible for Meiser, it's not yet eligible for anything. Nothing. You can't bring a korban on an animal that's nothing. So because the animal is only 6 days old, whatever, it's days 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 days before Rosh Hashanah hits, we don't care. We still register that in that previous fiscal year. The same would be true by Meiser Behema. And according to this version of the Gemara, yes, we do have a comparison between the world of Meiser Behema and the world of Meiser Peiros. That brings us to the end of this halacha. Baruch Hashem. The next Gemara is not as hard. Oh. I'm emotionally spent, but we should take a break now. Yeah, a little bit. The Gemara halacha beis masnisen, right at the bottom of Daf Ches Amud Aleph. We said already that we know the money was collected for the Maseches HaShekel and put into this special room, the Lishka, where all the coins were kept. And we also said that the coins were kept in boxes. B'shalosh kupot shel shalosh sayin tormenes halishka. Here's how it worked. This is a little cryptic language, but if you look at the language, the math actually works. In 3 boxes, which had 3 units of 3, namely the boxes held 9 sa. Each box held 9 sa. So that from tormenes halishka, that's how they would get the lishka, from these larger boxes. Fine. The cost of a land Aleph Beis Gimel. The boxes were labeled 1, 2, and 3, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. And what they would do, and the Gemara will explicate this, is that they would finish box A, Aleph, and then they go to box Beis, and then they go to box Gimel. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, very interesting historical note, especially if this was actually true. The Tanakhama held they wrote Aleph, Beis, and Gimel. Rabbi Shmuel Omer, Yevanis Kasuv Alein. It was actually written in Greek, Alpha, Beta, Gamma. It was written in whatever the Greek letters were Alpha, Beta, Gamma. They were written in that way. Says the Gemara, when a person goes into the lishka, when a person were to go in to extract money to pay, we had to make sure all of our checks and balances were in place to make sure that there was no geneva. What was the geneva that we were concerned about? They might steal a coin, they might steal. So what were the rules? A wildly strict set of rules. Here we go. You cannot go in with an unsewn hem. Not with shoes. Not with sandals. Tefillin. We were afraid they were going to crack open the tefillin, tear out the parshios, and stick in the chatzi hashem. Unbelievable level of nuance. It's incredible. A little bit kamiyah. We've spoken about kamiyah Maseches Shabbos and I think in Erev somewhere recently. Was it here? It wasn't here. No, it was in Pesachim. We spoke about it in Pesachim. That we spoke about the kamiyah where they would have a little amulet. There was room for a parchment where they could get rid of shadim. Yeah, there was a shadim of the zugos. That's where it was. Yeah. So that's there. We were afraid maybe you could fit a coin in there as well. And then says the Gemara, why do we not do any of this? So obviously we don't want people to steal, but the bigger concern wasn't the thievery. The bigger concern is what people might think might happen. Shema ye ani, maybe the Kohen who went in there would become poor, and then everyone will talk about him. But Yomru me'avon lishka he'eni, he became poor because he stole from the lishka. Oh, Shema ye ashir, maybe he'll become rich. But Yomru mitrumas halishka he'ashir, no, he stole, and that's how he became rich. So I heard in a beautiful shiur this morning, when people want to make a mockery, they'll argue both sides of the coin. They'll flip-flop on, oh, you're so poor, it's because you stole. Oh, you're so rich, that's because you stole. So there's not a lot of integrity in this approach, but the Mishnah is just pointing out, this is what we're concerned about. We don't want the coin to be hit from both sides. And that's why the Mishnah ends with a beautiful hashkafa. Sha'adam Let's say a person has to make sure that they are above any concerns, any questions from the public. Just like you need to do in front of a Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, a Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that the Kohen, if he goes in, if he's honest or not, a Kadosh Baruch Hu knows that. But Klape Chutz, it's not like that. And people have to be above the fray and make sure that they don't do anything wrong. Shne'emar, B'isem Nekim Hashem Yisrael v'Omer Umatza Chen v'Seichel Tov B'nei Elokim Yadam. It's the famous story of the Mishnah Brura that he said in court that he was chasing after the guy who stole from him. I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. So one of the lawyers in court, when they called the Mishnah Brura to court, they said, the judge is like, seriously? And the lawyer is like, no, I don't believe the story either that he ran after him. But I can tell you this, they're not saying that story about me and you. They're saying it about the Chavetz Chaim, who was above the fray. So when someone has such a level of excellence that there's no room for criticism because everything is done safely, then it makes things a lot safer. My Rabbi told me in education with women, your door has to be floor-to-ceiling glass. You never, extra halachos for yichud. No matter what, with your white, so many rules to make sure that everything is safe. So you have to be super careful, of course, in that realm. But this is talking about Geneva. Just make sure that you're above the fray. The Gemara continues, bottom of Daf Chesed, but Aleph, 3 lines from the bottom, Taman Taninan. In Maseches Shabbos, we had a discussion of finding a filu dal b'chamesh kupos. You're allowed to move 4 or 5 bales of hay. How big are the bales? On Shabbos, you're allowed to move things to make room. Of course, you can't carry, but they're not muksa in this particular case. You're allowed to move them. How big were they? Reb Zira, Shah, Les Reb Yoshia, Kama, Hu Shiur and Shal Kupos. How big were these things? So says the Gemara, Amar Le, turning to the top of Chesed Beis, Nilmod Sasim Imam Furish. We should learn out that which we don't know, Sasim, that which is hidden, Imam Furish, from that which is explicit. How so? Says the Gemara, Titania. Look at our Mishnah. V'shalosh Kupos shel shalosh sayin, shehein tisha sayin, shehein esrim v'sheva sayin. That's where we should learn it from a brisa that's similar to our Mishnah. It's not actually our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't say 27, but the Mishnah does the math for us. Every box, Aleph, Beis, and Gimel was 27 sa. It was 9 sa. 3 times 3 is 9, and there were 3 of those, so that's 27. The cost of Alein, this brisa continues similarly to our Mishnah, which says Aleph, Beis, Gimel, but doesn't quote the sheet of Rabbi Shmuel of Alpha, Beta, Gamma. That we don't see here. The brisa concludes, why does it say Aleph, Beis, and Gimel on the first, second, and third box respectively? Because mistapik mina rishona kodem l'shnia, mina shnia kodem l'shishi, so that you finish the boxes in order. Very good. What's implied from here? We're learning the sasim in Amafurish. We didn't know the answer to the bales of hay. We learned from our Mishnah that they can be huge. 27 saw, that's like almost the size of a full-size mikvah. That's huge. That's very big. That's a lot of material, so that's allowed to be moved. Talmud Tanina, we learned elsewhere, Motzi Yain Kidei Mezigas Kos and Maseches Shabbos. In regards to the shiurim of carrying on Shabbos that were problematic, so we are always relative to the item. So it has to be that the isser of carrying is Kidei Mezigas Kos. Reb Zira Shalas Reb Yochia, Kama shiurin shel kos. How big are we talking about? Amar Le Nilmod Sasim Amafurash. Let's again take a Mari Makom where we know something and apply it to that which we don't know. We don't know about what the shiur is for a cup. Let's see if we can figure it out. Detani Reb Chia. Reb Chia says, Arba kosos she'amru yeshnan revi'is shel yani be'italki. Please note that this Gemara was meant to be learned on day 2 of Pesach. It should not have been learned on Chol Hamoed, and it should have been on day 2 of Pesach, which is remarkable. Just to think about the details of the Dalet Kosos. It's really just muster that we live in Chutz La'aretz, but that's fine. So says the Gemara, what's the question here? Let's see what our answer is. You want to learn about this? Because the Brisa says in the name of Reb Chia. Reb Chia was a very, very early Amor. We still use the word Tani. He was one of the authors, or he was helping to author elements of the Mishnayos. He didn't write them, but he did carry a lot of them. So he said as follows: Arbakosa Shamar Yeshnan Revi'is Shel Yain Be'italki, a certain Italian wine. It had the shiur was a revi'is of wine. Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Avin Mishum Rabbi Yochanan to Rabbi Yehuda. This Mishnah is like the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tani, what does the Mishnah say about liquids in their shiurim for carrying on Shabbos? Mayim, when it comes to water, kedei gemia, just enough to swallow. That's the value of water. When you're very thirsty, you take a swig. That's sufficient. Rabbi Yehuda argues, Amar even less, kedei l'shuf bo esakilor, just to wipe on your eyes. And when it comes to yain, that was by water. By yain, it's different. Right after the parentheses, about a quarter of the way down, yain kedei gemia. According to the Tanakama, yain is just enough to swallow. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer kedei mezigas hakos. So we see that this Mishnah must be like Rabbi Yehuda, the Mishnah that we started with, that Rabbi Chia quoted, because it says it's a revi'is, and a revi'is is much more than K'dei Gmi. It's only like Rabbi Yehuda, K'dei Mezigas Hakos Mazug B'Kama. How much is this? Nishma'ina min hada. We can learn. We saw how much are we talking about, so we have to paste a couple things together. Quoting this brisa we just quoted, Ma'im K'dei Gmi of Rabbi Yehuda Omer K'dei L'Shuf B'Henes Akilor. We don't need this first part of the brisa, but by water we saw the Tanakama held K'dei Gmi, and Rabbi Yehuda said it was a little bit less. skip the parentheses again. And when it came to yain, the machlokas reversed. The Tanakama says that it was the amount to swallow, and Rabbi Huda Omer de mizigat sakos. Hada amru amazuk de mizigat sakos kama shurun shakos. How much is it actually worth? How much taka are we talking about? What is mizigat sakos? How much liquid is it? Ravavin Omar titarton virivia. It was a unit called the titarton, and it was 1.25 of that equals our version of a revius. Tomorrow's daf, well, really today's daf, the daf we're going to learn tomorrow, we'll speak about a revius in nuance to help us understand this shiur. Good. About a third of the way down, what about drinking all 4 cups at once? Would that be considered sufficient? Maybe it's a little bit late to ask the question, and maybe it's a very bad idea, but with the cups we were drinking out of on Pesach at my sister's house, they were like very small. They were all 4-ounce cups. They were perfect. Because you don't want to, you want to be able to function normally in the Seder. So it was, they were like perfectly sized cups. But what happens if you drink all of them at once? Is that considered acceptable? So the Gemara proves from a very unique source. Fascinating. Let's say a person says Hallel on the first night of Pesach and Shul. Allah Chalamais, if you skip it in the Haggadah, you're Yotze. You were Yotze Haggadah. Well, what do we say between cup 3 and 4? But
you can't skip steps, right?
Ladina, technically speaking, according to this shita, if you said halal and shul, we don't do this. You should read the Haggadah through and through. But if technically speaking, if we were being, bare bones, if you were to not, it's not. This is not the way to do it. But if one were to say halal on the first or second night of the Seder, and then they skipped it during the Seder, so then you'd be yotze. But what that means is if you were yotze in shul and you didn't say it in the Haggadah between cups 3 and 4, there was nothing to say because that's halal. So the Gemara implies from there, it must be Shaman Beis HaKnesses Yatza, and that's perfect. So therefore, you are allowed to drink all 4 cups, one after the other, no problem, because we see cups 3 and 4 can be put together. Because if you were Yosei and Shul, you wouldn't say Hallel in the Haggadah. Good. So that's a great argument. The Gemara continues, Hada Amraim Shasan Bekrach Echad Yatza. Okay, you answered the question about drinking it all at once. Mal Lishtosim Bepitzkan. What if we drank them slowly over the evening? We were just sipping a little bit here and there, but it wasn't done in a way where it was like the normal way to do it, the way we are makbid to do it now, which is we do our heseba and we kick back, hopefully the whole cup if we can. And if not, we drink Rov Kos, but we don't, it's not a slow drink. We pound it. We drink all the wine. You just that's why you have to get a smaller cup or just not as strong of wine. Says the Gemara, what would the din be? You should be drinking it. It shouldn't be said that you get drunk. So as long as that a person's not going to get so drunk from it, then that's fine. I recall learning earlier the reverse, that it's supposed to be something that can make you drunk. So that I heard it, the shiur that I heard today when I was preparing for this said, learn this Gemara a different way, but it's not the way that the art scroll paints this, and it's not the way that other Meforshim paint this either. It seems to be that this is saying that because you will not get drunk, therefore it's the case. Afalpi that you can get drunk. Okay. Mal, let's say yain shel shvius. Let's say a person has yain for shvius. So can you use that to drink? Says the Gemara. Yes, you can. Tanya Ravoshia yotzim beyain shel shvius. But the poskim right, if you have yain shel shvius, when you do dam tzvardei akinim, you should not take anything out with your finger, because you're not allowed to waste any of the shvius wine. You have to drink it all. So then you would that year, if you're using shvius wine, whatever the case may be, you should not take anything out of it. Mal, let's say bekonditon. Bekonditon is some type of mixed drink, but with wine, a wine base. The Tani Bar Kapara kuditin kiyayin. Bar Kapara was a very early Amora. He and Levi and Bar Kapara were the authors of the Tosefta. We'll see a reference to the Tosefta in a couple of lines. Kunditin kiyayin. That this is treated halachically like wine. Good. Hadam and yotzei miyayin kunditin. That's great that you said you're yotzei there. Mal, let's say biyayin mizugin. What about being yotzei with wine that's mazug? We've already assumed that, but now let's see the Mari Makomos. We are halfway down, a little bit more. We need to make sure that yes, you can drink them raw or you can drink them mazuk, a clear Mari Makom that you can drink the wine. It has to have the flavor of and the appearance of wine. And from here, Amar Rav Yirmiyah, mitzvah, let's say, biyayin adom. When a person is having the daled kotos, maybe in general as well, they should try to have red wine. Shneimar al teira yain ki sadam ki yitain b'koseno. It should look red. So I'm the great example of this. I can't drink red wine because it's a migraine trigger. So the poskim say, guys, put a splash of something of red in there. So I had 95% of the wine was bartanura and a little splash of red wine. No problem at all. It should look red if you can. If you can mamish, if it's an allergy, that's different. You have to figure it out. And then we'll see in a moment how far one may have to go for the mitzvah of the daled kosos, because apparently one of the Amorim had a headache for months afterwards. That's what the Gemara says. Tani, this olive here is not te'ena. This tani is tani. It's like from a brisa. The brisa writes, Mavushal kimasubal, that if wine is cooked, yain mavushal, right? Our famous discussion of yain mavushal. If a guy opens yain she'ena mavushal, it's a big problem. If it's mavushal, it's less of a problem. So tani mavushal kimasubal, from the word tavlin of spices. If you have flavored wine with spices in it, then they're both halachically the same. Ma let's say it's yain mavushal. What's the din? Can you have daled kosos with yain mavushal? So it says Gemara, Rav Yona yotzin b'yain mavushal. Yeah, you can't. What is implied from here? That it's not the ideal. I don't know. I'm just saying what the diuk is. I'm not saying anything in halacha, but it does seem from here that it. And you have to ask your local. What? Yeah. You're yotzin b'yain mavushal. You're yotzin. Even from the question, you kind of felt where the Gemara was going. Mahu latseis b'yain. It just sounds very like, all right, if you didn't have the good stuff, then you can have the bad stuff. That's fine. And this is where the. You can ask.
No, I'm just trying to follow the whole thing. What's the issue with mavushal versus non-mavushal?
No, the non-mavushal wine was considered to be a better wine. So here we're trying to have the best wine for this mitzvah. So it's not like it's not wine. It's wine. Right. It's better versus less better. You know? Good versus less good, whatever the language is. It's not because of quality. We'll see in a moment. It is considered a lower wine. It is. We got a heter from the Gemara. The Gemara is going to paint this out with more detail. In fact, let's see that right here. The Gemara says in the name of Rav Yona, Yotzin b'yayin mavushal. And Rav Yona was the one who posketed it because he was the one who had the sensitivity to yayin she'eno mavushal. Let's see what happened in the Gemara. Rav Yona l'taimin. The Rav Yona kadhavashasi arba kaseh the pischa. When he would drink the red wine, not the red wine, when he would drink the non-mavushal wine, when it was much stronger, have a chazik resha ad chaga. He would have a headache until chag. What's chag? Okay. So the article says Shavuos, and the Meforshim here say Shavuos, but the word Chag throughout Shas always means Chag. Yeah, and that's just a very. What?
This is not like elbow, like it was so bad as if I was.
What? Let's see. Chag. That would be 49 days from the Seder, right?
Still pretty bad.
It's still pretty bad. Or it means 6 months of a headache.
There's more guilt in Megillah, somebody is trying.
I have no idea. We have to look back there. We'll get there. But I want to remember that we had this conversation then. What?
There must have been a difference between cooked wine back in the day and how it was different today.
Well, the implication of the Gemara is very clear that Yain Mevushal was less strong than Yain Shalom Mevushal. That's
Right.
clear.
But today is.
Why not? You're cooking the alcohol.
Absolutely. No, that's right.
Right. Now,
Yeah.
it's still in the sense of the fancy stuff is always on mavushal.
Right.
But the alcohol content doesn't matter. And like we're saying, the Rashi light or whatever is not mavushal.
Right. But they're minutia in wineries where I'm sure not the same.
Yeah.
So that was the story of Rabbi Yona, who had a very bad headache. And the poskim jump off the page here to ask the following question: how far does one have to go to do a mitzvah? Do you have to put yourself in pain? Let's say that there's a year where there is no yain mavushal. Do you have to drink and take either 7 weeks or 6 months of a headache? All of them are bad. So how far do you have to go? We spoke about this in regards to people who have sensitivities for matzah. Matzah is a mitzvah deraisa. The kostos are mitzvahs derabbanan. But even by the kostos, we're very makbid that people would sell the shirt off their back to make sure they have the dal kostos. So, and obviously by mitzvah sensation Torah, it's mevaz vezad chomesh. You have to give up 20% of your liquid money. Absolutely. So these are shilas to be asked. A couple stories before we close out the day. Chamite, she saw Chamite, Chada Matronitza. There was a noblewoman who saw a person. He's talking about Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, but where's Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai in the Gemara? It's just almost out of the blue. So some of the Meforshim say there wasn't really Rav Yona here. It was actually Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. But either way, this story is referring to Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai. She saw Rabbi Yehuda Bar Ilai, Apohi Nehirin. His face was glowing. Amra, she said to him, Saba Saba. I don't know, was that an old man? I'm sure it was a term of endearment and not a slap in the face. One of the following 3 things must be true by you. She had a tradition that if a person were to have a glow on their face, it must have meant something. Oh, the shasvi chamraat, you drink a lot of wine. Oh, the malve beribisat, you're really a sinner. You make a lot of money and you're just thrilled. You're selling things with interest. Oh, the megadol chaziriato, you're raising pigs, another profitable business. So he says, Amarle, tipach rucha dahit itza, this woman is off her rocker, totally incorrect. None of these 3 things are true of me. Ella ulpani shchiachli, I learn a lot of Torah. Very simple, very glad. It's not that it's a gaiva thing. When you learn a lot of Torah, there's just certain dominoes that fall, and that's one of them. Rabbi Abo, Asi L'Tveria, one story about Rabbi Abo.
Yeah, what happened at the beginning of the story?
We don't know what happened in the beginning of the story, other than to say that this woman saw Rabbi Huda Bar Ilai and his face was glowing. So she said, you must have done X, Y, or Z. He said, I didn't do X, Y, or Z. I did A. I learned to.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, we don't have enough context here because we're not sure how.
Okay.
Yeah, it sounds like a Girsa issue. Could be, don't know. Which isn't surprising in Shekalim. But Rabbi Abo asked Tveria, when Rabbi Abo came to Tveria, Chamune in Aramaic means to see. It's the third or fourth time we've had this in the Masechta. Chamune Talmidoi de Rabbi Yochanan Apohi Nehorin. The students of Rabbi Yochanan saw that the face of Rabbi Abo was shining. Amru Talmidim the Rabbi Yochanan Ashkach Rabbi Abo Sima. He found something amazing. So then Rabbi Yochanan Asa Lagabe, he went over to Rabbi Abo Amar Le, my oraisa chadata shamas. What new vort did you hear? What geschmack piece of Torah did he didn't ask him about being malva beribis? Rabbi Yochanan knew Rabbi Abo was a tzaddik. It's a big Talmud Chacham. So he called him out on exactly what it was. What did you find? What's the chiddush? The only time you ever like this, Rabbi Abo, is when you find a new piece of Torah. So this is a very, very important historical moment. Amar Le Tosefta Atika. I found an old Tosefta that was written, new Brisas, new Torah Tatanaim that I'd never seen before. And he was lit up. So the Kara Ale, they said about him, Chachmas Adam Ta'ir Panav. That is the idea. When there's that level of excitement, that geschmackheit about learning, which is hard to reach. It's a level where I'm not there. We're not there as a culture. We're usually not like that. But that is the level when a person learns a lot of Torah, has that type of excitement, then Chachmas Adam Ta'ir Panav. We'll stop right here. Wishing you a beautiful night. Chag Sameach.